Normally I would do a fun little introduction to the video we're going to talk about, and then I'd play the video and interrupt every now and then to address points, but today we're going to do something a little different starting out. I'm just going to play the entire video. It's a commercial. I'm going to play the entire commercial for you with no pauses. Then we will talk about it, and I will break this thing down at every point. I want to add that this video was a little tricky to find on YouTube. Apparently not a lot of people like it, and you will see why. It is from Nike, the greatest dynasty ever. Have a watch.
Today I have a presentation on dynasties. But I refuse to talk about the ancient history and drama. That's just the patriarchy. Instead, I'm going to talk about a dynasty that I actually look up to. An all-women dynasty. Women of color. Gay women. Women who fight for social justice. Women with a jump shot. A dynasty that makes your favorite men's basketball, football, and baseball teams look like amateurs. A dynasty with fire braids. A dynasty with sick style. A dynasty with crazy dimes. A dynasty that makes Alexander the Great look like Alexander the... Okay. The dynasty that's been reigning for the past 25 years. It's undefeated since '96. The USA basketball women's national team. 7-time consecutive gold medalist. And most importantly, women that made it possible for girls like me to feel like they can be a part of whatever dynasty they want. The greatest dynasty ever.
I should kill you myself. You bring dishonor to your men. You bring dishonor to me. You bring dishonor to Rome!
Play the video. Yes, you just watched that. A video about the greatest dynasty ever being the USA Women's Olympic team. Now, obviously, there is a difference between sports team dynasties and historical dynasties, and if they were careful and respectful enough to make that distinction, I wouldn't have responded to this video. But not only do they not make that distinction, they specifically compare this sports dynasty to the Greek dynasty. So, as such, I think it's time that we take Nike to task and actually break down their points as to why the USA Women's Olympic team is the greatest dynasty. Shall we? Bear in mind, I might get a little angry.
Today I have a presentation on dynasties.
Fair enough. That sounds like a good class assignment. Assign a dynasty of ancient history to each student or group of students, have them do research on the dynasty, and then tell the class about it. But see, we haven't seen the rubric for this project, and she doesn't go into any details on what the project is about or how she's supposed to present it. Is she supposed to create a dynasty? Or is she supposed to talk about a specific dynasty? Was she assigned a dynasty? What goes into this project? We never know. This is all we get. Keep that in mind. Go on.
But I refuse to talk about the ancient history and drama. That's just the patriarchy.
The patriarchy. Our ancient history. The dynasties and civilizations built on the backs of our forefathers is all just drama and patriarchy. Now, there is no denying that men were the leaders of most ancient dynasties and for the majority of our history. But when you say drama, what do you mean? Do you mean the battles waged for the sake of families, countries, and freedom? Do you mean the laws and governments raised and enacted for the security of society, liberties, and benefits of everyone? Do you mean the leaders who led their nations and peoples to prosperity and greatness? Do you mean the carrying of nations upon the shoulders of our ancestors, including your ancestors, to help create nations for free men and women and children? Do you mean the destruction of nations that would seek to do harm or destroy the progress we'd created? Is that what you mean by drama? The drama that's just patriarchy? Well, that's pretty sexist of you for starters, and pretty ignorant for another.
Instead, I'm going to talk about a dynasty that I actually look up to. An all-women dynasty.
Again, sexist. Those stupid men can't do anything right. They just build civilizations and nations on their back, protect borders, families, and cities, and sacrifice themselves in blood and fire so that our ancestors could live on to create the modern era we live in. Those stupid men dynasties. And because, as we all know, women never led historical dynasties, did they? Get out of here, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, Catherine the Great, Boudica, Cleopatra, Hatshepsut, Zenobia, Queen Minseong, Wu Zitan, Queen Esther, Tamar the Great of Georgia, Empress Theodora, Catherine de' Medici, Mary Queen of Scots, and Eleanor of Aquitaine. What dynasties did you ever make major changes or be a part of? Just a bunch of patriarchal drama.
Women of color.
Now see, that was sneaky, because she had to say women of color, not just people of color, because there were dynasties created by men of color, like the Zulu, Zande, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, most of the Chinese dynasties, the Japanese dynasty, the Raj kingdoms, but yeah, had to be very careful about that one, didn't you? But again, those stupid males of color and their patriarchal dynasties of drama, how dare you shape the world we know? In fact, screw you white women, including the white women on the women's Olympic basketball team, Brianna Stewart. I guess you don't get lumped into that dynasty. You white women think you get to be part of this dynasty. This dynasty isn't meant for you. Don't you know that women of color never got to run any dynasties? It's their turn. Get out of here, Cleopatra, Hatshepsut, Zenobia, Queen Minseong, Wu Zetian, Queen Esther, Tamar the Great of Georgia. You get the point.
Gay women.
Greece. The Greek civilization was infamous for gayness. It's a common joke among historians about the gay orgies and homosexual activities of the Greek people. Maybe if you did some research for your project, you might have learned something. But how dare those heterosexual dynasties procreate to give birth to the next generation? How dare they follow their biological inclinations to continue on the lineage of their people's race and creeds? Just such boring drama.
Women who fight for social justice.
And screw the men and women of history who actually fought for freedom, democracy, survival, progression, and liberty. Screw the Greeks who fought back a Persian invasion to defend their way of life. Screw the Raj kingdoms who fought the invading Pakistanis who wanted to take away their lands and homes. Screw the African dynasties who fought against invading tribes and kings as well as European invaders. Screw the Japanese dynasty who fought for the stabilization of their country. Screw the Roman dynasties for fighting for the security of the Western world. What were they all fighting for, right? What a bunch of patriarchal dramatic losers. What were they dying and bleeding for? None of that compares to social justice, right?
Women with a jump shot.
So just women who can play basketball. I'm sorry to all of you women out there who don't play basketball. You're just not special enough for the dynasty.
A dynasty that makes your favorite men's basketball, football, and baseball teams look like amateurs.
First, you don't know my favorite football team, basketball team, or baseball team, so don't presume to know me. Secondly, you're talking about the women's Olympic basketball team, who has an impressive 25-year win streak. Granted, that's impressive, but it only puts the women's team they've gone up against to shame. It proves nothing about their abilities against male teams. See, you're saying that it puts male teams to shame, so I challenge the women's Olympic basketball team to play against the men's team. Will they still put them to shame? How about they put on some football gear and play the Patriots? Will they put the Patriots to shame? Or how about hand them a baseball bat? Do you see my point? Don't compare a team playing against other female teams to male teams playing against other male teams. But let's break this down a little further, shall we? The Lakers male basketball team have a win streak of 33 games in one season, while the women's Olympics team has, in the course of their history of streaks, 55 straight games. Now that sounds impressive, until you then realize that the 33 streak of the Lakers was made in the span of a season, while the 55 wins of the women's Olympics team was spanned over the course of 7 Olympic games. Over 25 years. Considering the fatigue, injuries, and training and constant effort put in for one season of basketball versus the 7 games and long span of the Olympics and the long gap between games, suddenly the women's Olympics legacy is dimmed a little. But hey, I wasn't the one calling out male teams. You are.
A dynasty with fire braids, a dynasty with sick style, a dynasty with crazy dimes.
All of that is 100% subjective. Style, looks, and appearance are all completely your own opinion and not shared by everyone, but for the record, let's compare this or this. Dost thou even civilize?
A dynasty that makes Alexander the Great look like Alexander the... Okay.
Alexander the Great was so influential to the Mediterranean, the Western world wanted to be him. He conquered empires in his 15 years of conquest. He never lost a single battle. This man is literally undefeated with a grand total of 20 battles at least, not counting the skirmishes he engaged in or the militaries that straight up surrendered knowing this absolute unit was coming for him. This guy bested the Thebians, the Athenians, the Geta, the Thracians, the Illyrians, the Persians, the largest empire to exist at the time, the Milesians, the Tyrians, the Uchians, the Sogdians, the Scythians, the Aspasians, the Asvaka, the Porus, and the Mali. This guy was a genius of war and literally changed the world. But yeah, your women's basketball team makes him look okay. Are you high?
The dynasty that's been reigning for the past 25 years. It's undefeated since '96.
However, we need to emphasize that in those 25 years, there have only been 7 Olympic Games. Just gotta point that out before your head swells so large you can't stand upright.
The USA basketball women's national team, 7-time consecutive gold medalist. And most importantly, women that made it possible for girls like me to feel like they can be a part of whatever dynasty they want.
Unless they're white or straight, right? As you made clear, they don't get a special mention, do they?
The greatest dynasty ever.
Nike, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be absolutely ashamed of this travesty. In all fairness, it's unfair to compare a historical civilization or dynasty with a sports dynasty. They're not at all the same. But I'm not the one going into a history class saying that ancient history is all patriarchy while talking about how the women's Olympics basketball team is the greatest dynasty ever because it's all women and because it has 7 gold medals now. That was you saying that. That's you making that comparison. You are ripping down the legacy of heroes, men and women who changed the world and built the world you stand on in order to say, look how great these Olympic women are. This could have been a proud moment for you to talk about America and its unity, to talk about this great American victory and how it makes such a huge difference for our country right now. Despite all the pain, division, and difficulty we faced as a nation, our sports teams in the Olympics, both men and women, are pulling out fantastic wins and fantastic feats. This could be a time of togetherness and unity, but this entire video is about division. It's about telling men they don't get a place at the table, that white people don't get a place at the table, that straight people don't get a place, that male sports teams are amateur in comparison to this one women's team, that style dictates all and not substance, that a historical titan like Alexander the Great was just small potatoes to a bunch of women with an inflated ball, that the history of our world was built by patriarchal men and is nothing but their drama. How dare you trivialize our history, our world, and our legacy to just this stupid generic nonsense. Shame on you, Nike. Shame on you for everything you put in this ad. As a sportsman, I'm insulted. As a historian, I'm appalled. This girl deserves a failing grade for this presentation, and Nike needs to go back to history class, because you might find that many of the great dynasties in history made their strides through uniting peoples around the world rather than dividing them. You care only about what attributes are significant to the winners of those medals. Their gender, sexuality, and race, not the win on its own, and that is probably more racist and sexist than anything I've seen out of a patriarchy. Have a nice day and read a book!